Hello and welcome back to this edition of the Hive's PCB Design with KiCAD series. My name is Ben and I am your host again today. So in part 4, we've been covering the entirety of the schematic creation, and we're going to wrap this bit up today in part 4E with the discussion of the ERC, how to understand and deal with warnings and errors, and some miscellaneous schematic tools that you might be interested in being vaguely aware of, or maybe not. You'll see, we'll see. So let's get into it. As always, we're going to start, this is just a reminder of the circuit we're developing here, and remember that the symbols in here are going to be different than you'll see in KiCAD because this was made in a drawing application, not a circuit design program. Whew! All right, we're almost done with the schematic in its entirety and finished with schematic capture, excuse me. But the last thing to do is the ERC, or the electrical rules check. And this basically verifies the electrical connections within the schematic, both that they're made and that the pin types are matching. Now, generally, you would be running this ERC a number of times throughout your schematic development, simply because you don't want schematic errors to kind of propagate through and become these huge problems. And also, you just want to cut them off at the surface. And you also want to have a manageable number of the errors at the end as well. So you can click Inspect, the Inspect menu, Electrical Rules Checker, or click this little icon here to bring up the window. The ERC checks against a whole bunch of different rules. Generally, these rules are fixed, but though they can be customized through the Schematic Setup window, which you can get through in the main area file, Schematic Setup Electrical Rules, although I strongly advise you not to do that. Faults are usually fine, so just click Run ERC here. And you'll see that we got 2 errors. What do those 2 errors actually mean? What are they referring to? If you click on them, they'll be highlighted in the schematic, which could give you some insight into what they are referring to. So click on them and you see that the markers are these kind of arrow things. The pink one is the highlighted one, and the red one is the non-highlighted one, obviously. So what do these actually mean? So they're pointing at pins and say that the input power pins aren't driven by output power pins. Frankly, like a lot of PCB CAD errors, these are pretty inscrutable unless you have some experience with them and the jargon. So Google and forums can be really helpful here. What this is really saying is that there's a mismatch in pin types. Remember way back when we were making the symbol for the LED driver IC in video 4B when we were creating the pins? If you don't, maybe this slide will trigger some memories. Perhaps you remember this warning and this explanation. Neither of these probably made any sense to you back then, but this is exactly actually what we're seeing. So I set those ground and VIN pins of the IC to power input types because they take in power, right? That kind of made sense. But unfortunately, the battery symbols pins are actually set to passive. And it's not allowed to connect passive pins to a power input because power inputs can only be connected to power outputs. Oops. How would you have known this? Of course, seems like a very esoteric thing to know. Well, first off, experience, but also there's this error kind of suggests that whatever is on the other side of the problematic VIN and ground pins, which is what the markers are pointing at, is probably not correct. There's something wrong there. So I went and actually looked at the battery symbol and its pin types to discover this mismatch. And then I actually had to go and look up what the pin types actually did in order to understand this a little bit better. So frankly, I didn't even realize what was going on here quite yet. But the question becomes, what do we do here? And realistically, we could actually choose to do nothing. If we wanted to, because it's not actually a functionality issue. We know that the battery is providing power and the IC is taking that power in, so there's actually no issue. This issue is really more of a warning. It's telling you that the pin types you expected aren't really quite right. But we're really going to fix it because it's so easy to do by changing the project's battery symbols pin types. And by project here, I mean we would just be editing the version of the footprint that's specifically in this project rather than the global part model. We're not going to be interfering with any other battery symbols on any other schematics, although it will update the battery symbols within this schematic. So let's start by closing the ERC window here just by hitting close. We're going to right click on the battery symbol and go to Edit with Symbol Editor. First thing to do is move the package name out of the way. That's been in light gray because it's frankly just in the way. And then we're going to edit the pins. Click one of them. Excuse me. Click on one of them and hit the E key. And they should be set to power output instead of passive as the electrical type in the pin properties window that pops up. You can also see at the top here, there's an informational banner that's telling us that this is a project-only edit, which is important. So once you change both pin types to power outputs instead of to passives, you can go ahead and save and then exit this window. And you can check that it actually got updated by going to the symbols properties within the schematic. So right-clicking and go into the properties window, and then look at the alternate pin assignments tab instead of the general tab on top. Under electrical type, you'll see that they have been changed. Now, once you've done that change, you want to save the schematic and then rerun the ERC. If you notice the markers and care about them, you can actually manually delete them by just clicking on them and hitting delete, or you can do so in the in the ERC window on the lower left by clicking delete all markers. So if we run the DRC again, we get this other warning, which is telling us that the battery cell, the symbol we just edited, has been modified in the library, which is pretty funny because we already know that's happened, which is great. So that actually means that there are no more errors, so we're good on that. So you can actually right-click that and hit exclude if you'd like to. Otherwise, you just know that it's good, move on with your life. So we'll close this window and delete any remaining markers as well. So congratulations, we now have a completed schematic. Completed and it passes ERC. This schematic is good to be laid out. Now, it's plausible that you would start laying out this schematic and do both of these kind of views simultaneously and interchangeably. You'd start adding some components and laying them out, and then adding some more components and laying them out, and connecting some nets, and maybe things change. So there's a bit of a back and forth here, but for now we've got a completed schematic, so we can move on to layout entirely. So the last part of this video will just be some miscellaneous things that you can do from the schematic, but you don't have to. It's just kind of things to be aware of. So if your parts all have simulation models, you can actually run simulations directly in KiCAD. I've never done this, but there is a walkthrough on the KiCAD website if you want to. If for whatever reason your parts aren't annotated correctly, either they're not annotated at all, they've got a question mark, or they're like annotated out of order and you don't like it, you can always re-annotate your schematic with this button here. This button will generate a kind of really basic bill of materials automatically. It's not great, but it's a start. So, that's an option. And finally, there's a very useful button which allows you to switch directly to the layout view without alt-tabbing or going back to the project window. One less click, maybe useful, maybe not. But with that, we completed our part 4E, which we covered ERC and some additional miscellany. A PDF of this video is available as always, linked in the description and hosted on the Hive's Wiki. This also brings us to the end of the schematic portion of our design. Congratulations, you made it. In our next video in the PCB Design with KiCAD series, we'll go to part 5A. We'll actually move over to the layout, which is known in KiCAD as the PCB view, and we'll begin setting up some defaults and some design rules in there as well. I will see you then.